He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
It's almost always true, and it's a psychological phenomenon that you see not only in governments but in personalities and relationships. That when one person is working really hard to get the buy-in, the co-opt, the agreement of another, it's because the person working really hard to get it, they're the weaker party. They absolutely have to have the help, the buy-in, the influence of the other. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned. You're going to want to be a part of this, I promise. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and it's dawned on me recently as I watch even more of the media aspect. Because it's easy to see in the blatant, obvious, out in front of your face when a newscaster has a microphone in their hand and you see them do things like stand in front of a burning building and go, no, this is peaceful. And you wonder if they know what's going on behind them. You know, there's a show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? And one of the gigs or gags that they do in Whose Line Is It Anyway is they actually put one of the characters, the cast members, in front of a big green screen. And they have no idea what's happening on the screen behind them. The audience can see it, and the people at home watching the television show can see it. And the reporter is standing in front of a green screen with a microphone in their hand, and they're reporting on something. And they have no idea what's going on behind them. And sometimes that's a burning building, and sometimes it's a raging flood, and sometimes there are jet planes flying at the back of their head, or cockroaches the size of a bus crawling around trying to eat each other, or giant ants biting at the top of their... The reporter has no idea what's going on behind them, what the rest of the world perceives. And yet, as they stand there with their microphone diligently reporting the script on the screen in front of them, there's this massive disconnect because there's a composite image, a composite understanding that the viewer has. The viewer can see the reporter. The viewer can see the screen. The viewer can hear the report. And the incongruity, the disconnect, the dysfunction between what's coming out of the reporter's mouth and the imagery that they're seeing, well, it's obvious to the rest of the world. It's the reporter who doesn't know what's going on behind them. I would love to think that only happens in gigs and gags like you might see on Whose Line Is It Anyway? But apparently it doesn't. We've all seen the shots where someone with a cell phone standing on a street corner is taking a picture. And in the picture, you see the small little gathering of 8 or 10 people holding up their picket signs and a big video camera and the ropes around to say, this is our scene, this is our spot, don't get in the way of our spot. And in the camera, what you see on the television screen is this giant crowd of protesters in the streets in front of XYZ building. But if you just back your perspective up a little bit, instead of looking at it through that little tiny lens where all you see is my face, you suddenly see the whole room. I mean, I could change a camera angle right now and all you'd see is my pocket, because that's where the other camera is angled. If I could change to another camera and you would see nothing because it's aimed into the dark. Why? Because I'm only talking to this camera. It allows me to change your point of view, what you see, what you understand, what you perceive. And for a long time, longer than you may want to admit is true, probably at least since the turn of the century, governments around the world have co-opted media. In fact, probably since before the turn of the century, and here's my evidence. There's this crazy notion that actually was documented for all the world to see. They wrote it down on paper and then signed it and said, listen, it's so important that the people who tell you the news, the truth, that report to you, be autonomous enough that they can say what needs to be said, even if we as your leaders don't like it. It's so important that that happen that we're going to actually enshroud that notion in a constitutional amendment called the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, which also includes the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press and the freedom of religion. They're all kind of rolled into one. Why? Because they're all of equal import. The opportunity for the government not to interfere with what you think, what you say, what you believe, who you hang out with. It's the number one thing. It's the first thing. But see, here's what I know about people, businesses. Maybe you've been a part of this M&A game, the mergers and acquisitions game. Maybe you noticed when Instagram was consumed, gobbled up, purchased, partnered, co-opted. See, it was a competitor to what is now its parent. In mergers and acquisitions, that's how it works. You have a competitor that comes along, they're smarter than you, they're faster than you, they've got greater technology than you, they've got opportunities that you don't have, they've invested a lot of money in their R&D. They're chugging along, they're making progress that you haven't yet made, but you have a deeper bank account. You have a bigger vision. You have a greater idea than what they're doing. I mean, they may be plodding along really, really well, but they're not quite hitting on all cylinders just yet. And so the bigger company comes in and says, we want to buy you up, devour you, ingest you, bring you into our system. And so they pay off the big players at the top. They eliminate the employees that are unnecessary or redundant because we already got people doing that work. And suddenly you have not two independent thinking, moving organizations and entities. You have one with one mission and one goal. And now they have twice the resources and twice the tools and sometimes even twice the revenue. I've been parts of organizations that were launched, $3 or $4 million invested in them. They were launched, they were put out there, they were making money, they were moving along, but they weren't making quite as much money as they wanted to. And yet while they were struggling to make, a competitor came along and said, hey, I think you got a revenue stream there that I like, and we're not selling that just yet, but we could absorb you into our organization, change your name to match our name, and expand our revenue flow. And because they had deeper pockets than we did, our organization went away and became a department of theirs. Happens all the time. It's a mergers and acquisitions. It's a business. There are people whose brains constantly are on the lookout for what other business could I bring on board? What other business could I, you ready for this? This is a big word. This is the word for the day, co-opt. What other business could I co-opt? Now, why would you co-opt? Well, in the sense of mergers and acquisitions, maybe you're buying a database. Maybe you're buying some technology, some R&D, some accomplishment that has already been done and you don't have to do the work on it. Now, maybe you're buying a revenue stream, a sales process with a customer base, with a product already in place, but they're not so good at marketing. So you're buying it up to say, well, we've never offered that before, but I like the way it works and it's making good money. There are some of those mergers and acquisitions, some of those alignments who have come along. And the whole concept of the show Shark Tank, the whole process of the 10X brand, 10x stages, 10x health, 10x real estate, 10x investments. It's the same concept. It's a matter of saying what would grow your business fast would be more money. I could give you an infusion of cash if you give me a little revenue on the outside of that, co-opted. It's a partnership. Most of the partnership between a weaker and a stronger and a weaker and a stronger company. And so you're looking at them going, well, you've got a lot of strengths that I don't have. In fact, if you watch people on Shark Tank, a lot of times what you'll see is people will say, well, I would love to have XYZ person because of your connections in, I don't know, retail sales, in online sales, in the shopping channel, in the ability to develop a brand, the ability to grow a brand, the ability to expand where we haven't been able. We've kind of hit the ceiling, as John Maxwell calls it, the lid on your leadership. And once you hit that lid, the whole organization pretty much stops there. Your leadership can only go so far. It's limited by your ability, by your talent, by your education. Listen to Dawson. In his work with the 10X team, a lot of his teaching came from John Maxwell, but he's been able to take that and reproduce businesses over and over and over and over and over and over. And if you listen to Brandon Dawson talk about business, you realize he knows a lot that I don't know. Well, why would you not bring him in to educate your team, to co-opt your education, to co-opt your opportunity? Well, that's going to cost you, right? You're going to have to give up some equity. In the case of the Shark Tank, many times they've said, let me just buy your company outright. I think you got something going on, but you obviously are over your head. You have no idea how to expand it to the next level. You don't know what scaling looks like for your business. And that's okay. I'm just saying I'd rather buy it off of you than to share the revenue with you. So take a cash buyout. And some people have looked at that and said, you're right, I'd rather take the cash and go buy a farm than to stay in this business and keep plodding along and sharing off my revenue. But see, that's an option when you're co-opting with a merger and acquisition, with a partnership, with a business. It happens in marriage. People realize he's got strengths that I don't have and she's got strengths that I don't have, and so they choose to come together to raise a family, to move forward. I just recently watched the Reagan movie with my wife, and I loved when Nancy said, and I hope that this was a true statement, but she said, what I know is that you can't do anything significant in this life alone. And then reinforced that concept through the course of his career in politics. Every time there was something that came against them that felt like there's no chance, she said, I'm behind you 100%. I'm going to stand behind you and push. There was never a chance for her to go, oh, look at Nancy. That wasn't it. That wasn't her heart. Her heart was, there are co-opt relationships that are symbiotic, that are synergistic, that when people come together, they magnify, they amplify the ability of another. But then there are also those co-opted relationships which are completely parasites. They're parasites. They come along and they think, well, I need you more than you need me. I need your talents, I need your wisdom, I need your influence, I need your ability. And even in the Reagan movie, there was a little bit of discussion about the idea that when the relationship was built between President Reagan and Pope John Paul II, a lot of what was going through the mind of the American politician was Pope John Paul II has a loving, endearing relationship with 1 billion people around the planet. The Catholic Church, that's a lot of people. That's a very large army of thinkers. Now, they're scattered in countries all around the world. They're not all in one voting block. That wasn't the agenda. The agenda was to sway the thinking, the ideology about nuclear war. And the Cold War came to an end without a shot fired. Why? Because the ideology was swayed. It was a co-opt of influence and power and relationship. But it's nothing new. Remember, that First Amendment attached to the Constitution of the United States, it's over 250 years old now. How's that happen? How does that happen? How did they know 250 years ago? Well, because the reason they came to the United States, the reason they came, they got you because it was a current state of the church. That is not just a play on words. That is a very specific problem. They looked at the current state of the church of the state. See, around 1545, there was a Bible produced. It was the Geneva Bible. And that Geneva Bible had some, in the ways of King James thinking, some antiquated thoughts in it. But you could also go back even further to Martin Luther's, or even further back to the Tyndale Bible, the first one actually translated in English, where Tyndale's Bible was actually, William Tyndale, he translated straight from a lot of the original languages and translated very directly what the expectations of those people who would follow this Jesus Messiah guy, that they would act in a way, speak in a way, do things in a way, in a specific way, in a certain way. In fact, they called it the way, his way, the Jesus way. And the king realized, that's a problem. That's a problem for me. Now see, ironically, when that Jesus dude walked on the earth, the rulers at that time, the Caesars, I didn't see him as a threat. It's a little carpenter guy from the other side of town, from a small nowhere town. Nobody really cares about it. No, whatever. Until the religious leaders pushed him forward and went, he's a problem. And literally Pontius Pilate went, he's not a problem to me. I don't get it. You guys deal with it. And they brought him back again. They're like, we have found him guilty of treason. You got to get rid of him. He's got to overthrow the whole country. And again, Caesar looking at it going, no, I don't see it. I don't see how that's going to happen. But they were given a choice. Do you want this Jesus guy that claims to be your king, and you don't accept him? I get that. But do you want him, or do you want this known criminal over here? And they said, give us the criminal. Or you can release him, but get rid of that dude. And so they got rid of that dude. And now he's gone. And yet there are a whole lot of people that are still talking about what he did was pretty cool. What he did was really special. What he did was unique. Caesars didn't care about him. Problem's gone. No big deal. And yet they wouldn't stop talking about him. And everybody that kept talking about him, they'd throw him in jail, or they'd cut their heads off, or they'd hang him upside down, or they'd set him on fire. They'd just stop talking about the guy. He's dead. He's been dead. He only lived 33 years, but you're still talking about him. But see, when we fast forward far enough, we realize that those people who won't stop talking about a guy who died 1,500 years ago, they may not have been a problem to Caesar when he was alive, but now that he's dead, King James is looking at him going, these people are a problem. They won't do what I tell them to do. They won't submit to what I'm telling them to do. Yeah, Facebook just kicked me off live. See if they'll bring it back. And they said, well, how do we get them to at least acknowledge that the government exists? That they think they're only submissive to the church. What is the church anyway? That became the question. Now the real irony was there was this linguistic ability to take translations because nobody spoke Aramaic or Hebrew at the time. So Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, that was the original conversations that took place from Moses all the way up to Jesus and his friends. But since nobody speaks that language, we can kind of loosely translate some of these words. And they very effectively did that. Even in what we would call the canon of Scripture, the Bible itself. To this day, 2024 years after he was done away with, roughly, there were people still trying to walk the way he walked and talk the way he talked and do the things he did, because that's what he told them to do. And there are instructions in this particular translation of the Bible that have been co-opted by the king, where the king said, don't do it like that. Do it like this. Like a merger and acquisition, Constantinople was probably the first. Constantine, Constantinople, Mr. Mopel, Mr. Popel, Mr. Constantinople. That whole relationship process was a little bit skewed from what the way intended. But King James said, let's take their instruction manual and we'll just alter things in the instruction manual, and eventually we'll get to the place where they won't have any connection with the old instructions. They'll only have the instructions that I wrote. And so 2,000 years later, we have all these variations of interpretations, many of which has been co-opted by kings and princes and powerful leaders and governments who said, well, you can't do it like that. You might note too that, and if you watch the movie Reagan, you'll hear about this, the idea of worshiping anyone other than the supreme political leader. Under Stalin, under Mao, under all of them, God is a problem. A religious concept is a problem. It doesn't matter what your denomination is. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Jewish. It doesn't matter. If there's a God in your life, he's in the way of the supreme communist leader, and so he must be done away with. And so gathering for assembly to worship, can't be done. Nope, 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 nope. And that's why the founding fathers of this great nation, 250-ish years ago, said, what if we enshrine the idea that you have the right to speak your mind, you have the right to gather with people who share your ideas, you have the right to worship whatever God you want to, whether we like him or not. And you have the right as the press to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You're not obligated to stare at the camera and read the script we've written for you without regard for what's going on behind you. You're not obligated to tell us the message that has already been pre-written. You have the right to speak your mind, to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. See, anytime a business co-ops another business, it's because they're looking to buy strength. Anytime someone co-ops in a relationship and says, I want you to be a part of what I'm doing because you being here makes me better. Call it synergy, call it amplified, magnified opportunities, whatever label you want to put on it. But when a government co-ops, here's what the government knows. You have a strength, you have an influence, you have an ability, you have a power we don't have. And we need it. And so it's been in Hollywood films, it's been in music, it's been in the books that you read on the shelf, it's been in the social media changes. Do you think I'm kidding? Just if you've ever taken a screenshot of something in your life that you've watched over the last 5 to 10 years and you saw it on social media and you're like, that's a fascinating fact. I'm going to take that screenshot, I'm going to take a look at it. I challenge you to go back to those screenshots and then look up the same information today and see if it says the same thing. The odds are it's been changed. There are people, I've listened to interviews with them, who are paid by certain worldviews to alter what you would consider a source document. Wikipedia, Google, Bing, any of those databases, they have access to all this data and all this information. The same data and information that's feeding AI. When you simply ask your device a question, the answer you get is going to be based on this database. But this database has been co-opted. The content of the instruction manual itself has been changed. Now they do it in small businesses, they do it in media, they do it in music, they do it in entertainment, they do it in sports. Why do you think people kneel on the sideline? Do you think that was one random person's random idea? Or do you think maybe there was somebody who pushed them in the direction or gave them the idea or said, here's what will be your benefit if you just listen to the interviews of some of the top performers and entertainers in the world, and they'll tell you what their journey has been like to get to the top and everything they had to give up and everything they were co-opted in to get that opportunity to be at the top. Being a superstar is not just hard work. It comes with compromises. Being at the top level, being well known, There's a cost to that. It's a co-opted cost. But see, in all of those, there's a little bit of balance of power where perhaps the government or a larger entity says, let's come together. You've got assets I don't have. I've got assets you don't have. Let's work together. But then there are those blind co-ops where there's a truth known that the presumed source of power is out of its depth, way out of its depth, way out of its value proposition, way beyond its ability to say, here's what I bring to the table. In fact, what it brings to the table is minimal by comparison. In my opinion, when King James co-opted the instruction manual itself of the Christian faith, he did it because he knew, I've got to stop their power and influence in its tracks, number one. And number two, they possess a power I don't have access to. You realize that some of those people who walked in the way in those days recent after the death of Jesus and that couple hundred years right after he was gone, they reached more people, convincing them of the way, sharing with them ideas than the best influencers can do today in a 2-hour broadcast on the best social media in the world. And they had none of that. They didn't even have a printing press. Everything they shared was written by hand or delivered by mouth. And yet the influence of that message was so broad, so vast, and so deep, so life-transforming that governments from that day till this have tried to co-opt that power and go, what is this influence they have? And governments from that day till this have tried to shut it down, to silence it, to do away with all forms of religion. Anything that sees a higher power that is not the ruling government. That's a co-opt based on fear. That's a co-op that says, I've got to control you or silence you because I'm terrified of you, because I can't control you. I've got to make some rules and some policy, some ability, some misleading misdirection, whether it's music or entertainment or your instruction manual itself. I've got to deceive you to lead you. My friends, that's a problem. There's a reason that we have to speak up, to tell the truth, to tell our stories today. We've got to tell the stories of the freedom we've actually lived through. I've been saying this for years. Recently, a political candidate said, it's not just experience, it's my lived experience. Yeah, it's one thing to observe something, it's another thing to study something, but to walk through the fire yourself, that changes the way you understand it. When you come out on the other side smelling of smoke, you've been in the fire and it's obvious. That's a story worth telling. That's a story that hasn't been co-opted by the influence of those who want to manipulate your income and your outcome. Governments have been co-opting religious institutions, educational institutions, entertainment, small business, large business for generations. I don't see that coming to an end anytime soon. What I do challenge you to do as leaders is to ask yourself, why are they trying to co-opt what I'm doing? Is it to stop me, or is it because I offer something they don't have? And when you can get your hands around that, when you can better understand that, you can become a very powerful entity on your own, and you can maintain control of the influence that you've been given. That's my challenge for you. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.